Testing, testing. Hola. Good morning. Hi. Good. Sounds good? Good.
No? Okay. We have to ask for a table then. What? See it first, so they should wash and then whatever you think. I don't care. Thanks. Yeah, you just have to use it. I know, I agree. We should take, I need footage because we might be taking this. That's what I'm saying. So just so you understand, we're taking this, making a separate video for the Hahn. Okay. That's, I realize that. I know you have to be conscious of that.
¿Qué vas a poner aquí? No se ve, se ve allá.
agreement, you have to reserve it.
I'm not trying to make you nervous, but I don't think Biden has as many candidates.
All right.
Well, it's a good reason, probably.
Both heads, please find your seats. We're about to begin.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to SIyum in Sukkah in memory of Elliot. Hahn. Okay, so the Gemara then in the Sukkah talks about Bilga, family Bilga. There's the Gemara has two stubborn what Avera that the family did. One was one of the daughters was Mored. She married a Greek king, and she was Mored. Lucas, well, how are you going to take the money of Ben Israel and not help them? That was one possibility of the Avera. The other was they were late to the Shmirah. So Gemara says that it makes sense according. We punish the whole family. So the Gemara wants to know how it's possible to punish the whole family because of the sin of error of one person. So the Gemara, the side that we're going to focus on is the side that she actually herself, one child, did an error. So the Gemara asks, how's it possible that you're going to punish an entire family just because of an error of one person? So the Gemara says, when a kid says something, they must have heard it in their parents' house. So it makes sense that parents could get punishment if they heard that. So the Gemara says, fine, that's okay, but what about, why is that fair to the whole watch? Why is the whole Shmirah going to get punished just because of this one individual family? So the Gemara says, when a Russia and a Shteina and a Shafta and a neighbor, when something goes wrong, firstly, there's many Shaftim in this, but one shot about that is it's partially your fault. If you move next to a Russia, it's your fault, because you know it's going to rub off on you. But the Gemara says back, also, but on the flip side, Tov l'tzadik, Tov l'shteinu. Shenemar l'tzadik, ki tov, ki prima aleim yochelu. But on the flip side, if you have a good neighbor, if you have a righteous neighbor, the opposite is true, and it rubs off, and it's good, and you get the brachos of everything. So I thought this was a very apropos, just it happens to be the end of the Sukkah, but it's very apropos. Of course, we're all family, all neighbors here, and specifically myself, we are really neighbors with the Hahns, and Elliot would say that is this Pasher, but the truth is I'm not speaking today, but still, for SIyum, the friendship and vision, Elliot is always on my mind. It's how we rise to every occasion. He always push us so hard to grow and to accomplish, grow the yeshiva. and it's always on my mind, and I'm very happy that we have the privilege to be SIyum this bus. Okay, so what are we doing?
This is in front, but based on what you just said about getting punished, I guess generation or family or neighbor get punished based on someone else's actions. And I guess first I want to say B'Shus Rabbanim and all the Hashim guests in this room. Thank you, Yeshiva, for organizing all this. But like the initial Elliot being his side was last Sunday, so we moved it over because Yeshiva started this week, and like Bernstein mentioned, my father was very, very big and very big in Muna B'Tachon. So being that the I guess the ceremony is today, and Bernstein mentioned what he mentioned, I think it's apropos to discuss. I guess I want to mention one story that what we used to hear, the whole family used to hear, Elliot ben Yehuda, and I don't want to leave out my mother-in-law, the matriarch of the family, but she was obviously had a huge influence in that as well. And I'm just going to share one story that I heard that I used to, and maybe even two that I used to see and hear all the time. The Hahn family used to sponsor a lot, I guess, for the last 20 plus years, the NCSY Shabbaton and many other events. And a lot of times people would come over to him and to my mother-in-law and say, "Oh, thank you very much." And his response always was, no matter what, same response. It's not me. I'm just doing Hashem's will. Hashem gave me pikadon. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. That was the answer. And I think that's the bracha that we're going to have, and that's the stuff that we hear in our house, and that's going to benefit us, the bracha we have, that my kids have, to have a role model like that, to understand that Hashem is in charge and that nothing is about me. And this, when my father passed away, last story, my father passed away, there was a book on a stand he used to learn. My father, as I think most of you, most of the Rabbanim and whoever knows him knows well, he was very big into Gevei Eater. So he had this one book, and being that last week was his yurtzeit, and then they moved it over, so I said, my father-in-law, like Mercer mentioned, was very big into Bishert. So I looked at the sefer he was learning. I was looking for something to say, and the last paragraph of this week's parsha, or last week's parsha, had one paragraph, and it mentioned something that I believe is the lesson that I personally take from knowing Elliot ben Yehuda. And when I personally said to me, he says, I want to have this event, I want people to know who Elliot ben Yehuda was. In my opinion, whatever it's worth, this is who I believe he was. It says he loved life, he loved his family, and he was always happy. Simcha was his thing. And there was actually the Bresler brother says, you take the word simcha, and you just change the vowels. It's she, macha. That you erase, or that you erase, whatever. And the lesson I took from that, and it's B'Shert, because this was, I believe, this was Elliot ben Yehuda. Shemacha means that you erase. Erasing means you take yourself out of the equation, and you say, thank you, Hashem, for everything you gave me. You never make yourself the mainstay or the ikar of anything. You're able to put yourself aside and you avoid machlokas, and there's no gaiva. It's always this simple. That's who I think Elliot ben Yehuda was. Thank you.
Okay, so we're now going to SIyum. Hajj Lov Mesech Sota LaHajj Kola. Daita Lov Mesech Sota Daita Kola. Lo Sinis Sheminot Mesech Sota Lo Sis Sheminon. Love on the Hadim Lom Nasi. Ibrahim Rahman Ravin Lom Sin Shtei Tzor Stam Rusin Lom Mazeh. Iman Lom Ba. Hanim Papa Hanim Papa After Papa Abba Papa Rafim Papa Rafish Papa Sir Papa Papa Adar Papa Dar Papa Harab Nan Ravis Race of Sophia Papa Israel. The Lana Nathan says the same Papa Israel. Colonial Edition Metal Base or Set Lishma. The Vice the Hakmini the Setup he Lom he Lee. Yilivi Samim Kat Manu Evo Shalom Rosh Kat Bedata Kivam Kisai Brokato and Ryan Din Kato Amen Amen Min Salovai Modiman Nachnu Fnacha Adonai Lila Avinu, Shesamtach Al Kinim Yoshri Beis HaMedrash, So Samtach Kinim Yoshri Kamanos, Anu Mashkim Vehe Mashkim, Anu Mashkim Lirvei Sorah, Ve Mashkim Lirvei B'Telim, Anu Melehim Amelim, Anu Melehim Kabin Star, Ve Amelim Ve'enim Kabin Star, Anu Ratzim Vehem Ratzim, Anu Ratzim Chai Olam Haba, Ve'em Ratzim L'Ver Shachas, Shnemar Vatah Elohim, Teredim L'Ver Shachas, Anshi Dam Mirra Lo Yetzudim, V'niatach Bach. Yehira Tzom V'Nacha Adonai Elek, Shemesh Zetayin Zayim Sukkah Kei Tazrin Haskell Mesechel Sfarim Achirim SIyum Lilmo Labid Vishma Lasu Kaimis Kol Derei Semel Torah V'Yavo Skus Kol Tanoim Bamram Tamanich Chacham Yamol Li Zari Shel Samush Torah P Zari Zari Arolom Skayim Di Lefko Tankal Asaf Shachlo Tishmar Lefta Atzisa Hisi Techa Yivir Roy Yemecha V'Sifa L'Kol Shon Skayim Arakum Yimam Bismillah Oshra Tavora Adonai Zimon Kina Direct Zimon Shalom. V'Sleish Mirabah. Namad Asil Skadasa Ayasam Mesaya Sakli Yasam Ayalma V'Nei Karta Yushlem Shkachlot Etlei V'Gabah Karpal Chana Nufra Minara L'Hasava V'Chana Yishmai Lasrei Yamit B'Shar V'Tuv V'Msei V'Karei Economy Cham Chai T'Chal Beis Yisrael B'Glav T'Makarim Yisrach V'Shavach V'Skar Shema V'Sensei Sidavi Slav Shmek L'Shav Re'Chu Le'Elah Mekha B'Chasar V'Shresash Asam V'Nechem Asad Amiram Yamav V'Rameh Yisrael V'Ram Tamidei Al-Kol Tamidei Samidei Al-Kol Mandi Askim Reisa Div Asar Div Asar Asar Yedhaman Kol Shalom Rabba China V'Chis Rachim V'Chayim Rifen V'Zan Rivita Efer Kalam Kadam V'Voni V'Shemai V'Rameh Yisrael Rabba V'Shemai V'Chayim V'Leim V'Chayim V'Rameh Shalom V'Ramah V'Yaseh Shalom V'Leim V'Chayim V'Rameh Hey!
I knew you did this, so I had First of all, you that's actually on answer. So what's doing? He blocked his number. Also, I spoke to
Both sides, please finish up, find your seats. We're about to begin a short program.
Very nice, really very beautiful.
Okay, good morning to both sides. As you know by now, we're here to commemorate the third yard site of Elliot ben Yehuda, our dear friend Dr. Elliot Hahn. I remember last year we had this yard site. It was a boiling hot day. We could not have it inside because of COVID issues. We were outside. Maybe it was Bashert, as Shlomo mentioned, everything's Bashert. Dr. Hahn appreciate that a lot. It was Bashert that we had it outside because it was right in front of the two buildings that Dr. Hahn dedicated to dormitory buildings. And it was very inspiring to see such a yard site right in front of the involvement, what symbolized and what was a major part of his participation in the yeshiva. It was very hot, but it was a beautiful yard site and a very schus-laden event for the neshama of Elliot ben Yehuda. Without any further ado, Rabbi Osai, we have a very dear friend of the Hahn's. We asked to share a few words. he will tell us a little bit about Dr. Hahn, what he means to the community. I really shouldn't say what he's about to tell us because I didn't ask him. But either way, Dr. Stu Gross, who's a very dear friend, we welcome you. Please join us.
I'm recording.
Rabbis, Mrs. Hahn, I apologize, I have trouble standing, so they kind of set this up for me. Reb Moshe asked me to say some words about Dr. Hahn, a good friend. First thing I would say to begin with is that he was a mensch, but he was more than a mensch, actually. His life was a Kiddush Hashem. His and Lillian, the wonderful things they did together for the community. Pam met them maybe 30 years ago. By then, they were good friends with the Castles. They lived next door to each other. We kind of got together with them, and the three families were just wonderful together. We had many Shabbos meals, 2 families, 3 families. Obviously, there are a lot of other people, but we just developed a very special relationship. And then we started, Pam and I started traveling really kind of all over the world with Lillian and Elliot. He was a world traveler because of his business. He taught us how to get through Europe for 2 weeks with just basically carry-on luggage, nothing else. No suitcases, we just managed to get through. We went to Canada, Europe, Israel, bunch of different places. I would introduce him as my drug dealer friend because he, 2 other people, started a generic drug company. And after they sold the company, Lillian and Elliot became philanthropists. There's no other word to describe it. You know the dormitories here. If you go to Israel, Asia Torah, there's this big chandelier in the main, it's 2 stories tall. It was a Chihuly. He's a famous glass blower, beautiful, beautiful, but they donated it. I know Elliot gave Rabbi Shapiro money, said use it for whatever you need it for. Anybody in the community, anything. When he ran out of money, Elliot would give him more money. I know Lillian told me after he was Nifter, a lot of people were coming out of the wall saying, well, I was having hard times, Elliot lent me money, Elliot gave me money, let me get back on my feet. Wonderful, wonderful things that they did. One of the things that I really appreciate that we got involved with was, as Shlomo was saying, the NCSY Shabbaton. They sponsored before COVID Shabbaton in the community, basically. They had 100 non-affiliated Jewish teenagers. They knew they were Jewish, but basically it wasn't for the frum NCSYers. They have this every year. They get about 100 kids. We'd house them in the community. They davened together. Elliot would probably give them a little bit of speech at the beginning. And the nicest thing that I really enjoyed about this was that at Havdalah, basically, I don't know if you guys have been to a Jewish camp, sleepaway camp, but they have the Havdalah services, which are really nice. The NCSY calls it having away Shabbos, and they had 100 of these unaffiliated kids, maybe not dressed quite what we would consider sneeristic, but short sleeves, some of them. Anyway, they would sing, some of them on their team would get up and tell stories, and then Rabbi Shapiro, like the cleanup here, he would come, you've got this Orthodox rabbi, the beard, he would have these kids in the palm of his hand. He's a Maggid. I don't know if you know him, if you ever heard him speak. Among other things, he's a phenomenal storyteller, and the kids who were there the year before tell us this story, that story. And then they had a Abdullah ceremony, which was just beautiful. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I've seen scrapbooks that Lillian and Elliot have with letters from these kids. I'm going to spend my gap year in Israel. I'm going to try to keep kosher. I'm going to get involved in Jewish things, on and on and on. How many lives they changed by doing this? It was just a wonderful thing. You don't when you hear about it, but you don't really hear about it. Again, Shlomo mentioned he set aside time for learning. You walk in on Shabbos, he'd be sitting in the window with a sefer. The other thing is, he believed, as they were saying, in Besher. Things were Besher. Everything didn't rattle him. They never flaunted all the tzedakah, all the wonderful things they did in the community. They did it. There's probably hundreds, thousands of things that the two of them did that nobody, just don't know about. You don't hear. They never brag. I did this. That just wasn't in their nature. Just change a little bit here. When we were traveling in Paris, we were in the Louvre Museum, and Elliot kind of tripped, didn't really hurt himself, sat down at a desk. We said, we'll be back in a little bit. We come back, there's a line of people in front of the desk. It was an information desk. She didn't realize he was giving people directions. He didn't speak French. They were coming up and he was telling them, go here, go there. We, coming back from St. Augustine, we rented an SUV, stopped by, get gas, lock the car, come back to the car. Who's got the keys? Elliot's got the keys. Where are the keys? In Elliot's jacket. Where's Elliot's jacket? Locked in the car. We trying to figure out how to get into the car. To make long story short, I don't know how we did it, but the car had a code on the side. He walked up, punched in the numbers, the door opened. I know he didn't get it from the car company because I made the arrangements and stuff. I had no idea how that happened. When we were traveling, we were always looking for Elliot, the three of us. We would go someplace, always, where's Elliot? Where's Elliot? Got lost in the crowd, tried to get him to wear a red cap, something bright so we could find him. It was always, where's Elliot, where's Elliot? But we had marvelous times together with him. Moshe said I had 3 minutes and basically done. I just end where I began. He was a mensch. He was his life, both his and Lillian's Kedusha Hashem, just no question about it. He leaves a wonderful legacy. Lillian's carrying on. The kids are carrying it on. He was my friend. I miss him. My wife misses him. The Hahns, the Castles miss him, obviously. His family misses him. And I think the Jewish community in general misses him. Most people don't really know what they are, what they're missing. He was just a role model and a truly wonderful person. I thank Moshe for asking me to say a few words about my friend. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Very nice.
Again, I'm going to say just a few short words. I want to first corroborate, even though it's not necessary to corroborate, one point that Dr. Gross mentioned. I remember for many years, I used to get a call from Rabbi Shapiro, probably about this time of the year. He used to ask me for a list of people that needed help to pay their tuition. People that were assessed a certain amount, and it was hard for them, things were tight for them. No one knew about this. They used to ask me for a list because Dr. Hahn had given him some money, a nice amount of money to put aside in an account, special account for this purpose. Give me a list of people who need help. And I used to go through the list of all the tuition people, figure out who we thought needs some extra help. We sent the list over to Rabbi Shapiro. Dr. Hahn didn't even know who was on the list. It was all private, anonymously, so to speak. And we used to get a check to cover the amount that we thought was necessary to just make up that difference which people probably would not be able to pay. This was part of his Asnei Leches, things done privately, no one knew about. Not even Dr. Hahn didn't know the people's names. That's just one small illustration which Dr. Gross was referring to. I want to mention one thing, which I think is very meaningful, which we can learn. The purpose of a yard site, of a Suda, of speaking, is to inspire people, and the more inspiration people receive, the more they do, because of the memory of the nifter, it's a schutz for the nifter. So it's appropriate to relate and to speak about some issues, some points, some ma'asim tovim which he represented. In short, I would say Dr. Hahn was a great investor. You probably think I mean he knew how to pick the right stocks, he knew the right investments. That's not what I'm referring to. That's true also. That's not what I'm referring to on both sides. There's a medrash in this week's parsha, yesterday's parsha. It talks about how Moshe Rabbeinu was misaking that Klal Yisrael should daven 3 tefillos a day. Why? Because he saw Ruach HaKodesh, he saw in the future that the Beis HaMikdash would eventually be nechrad, would be destroyed, and there would be no more Bikurim. Bikurim was a tremendous chus for Klal Yisrael. They were inspired throughout the year by the Bikurim to serve Hashem, be close to Hashem. There will be a problem in years to come, generations to come. There will be no more Bikurim, no more Beis HaMikdash. So Moshe Rabbeinu was masakin to replace the Bikurim 3 tefillos a day, which we do nowadays, which is very powerful, says the Medrash. There's nothing like 3 tefillos. K'fi shechavev hatfilos nefesh baruch hu b'kol ma'asim tovim b'kol karbanos. There's masakin tefillos. The question is so very nice. There will be a need in the future, but that's generations down the road. Why was he masakin it personally at that time? Let him wait for generations. They'll be masakin it. Klal Yisrael has gedolim. Anshe Knesset Gdolim. They'll masakin later on. Moshe Rabbeinu obviously has such a love, such a chavivas, an appreciation of mitzvos. He says, I have to do it now. Prepare for the future. It's not necessary now. There was no need to have the tefillos at that point. The karbanos were there. The bikurim were there. No need. But when you care and you feel something is so special and so chashuv, you do it days, weeks, years, and generations in advance. When I say Dr. Hahn was a great investor, he was a visionary. When he first came to us, we first approached him, and he made his first major dedication, the first dormitory building. When we heard he said yes to a certain number, we were all floored. It was our largest dedication, donation at that time. And the message I got, the message we heard was, because Dr. Hahn wanted to ensure, to invest, to make sure that North Miami Beach, the community, grows and prospers, the yeshiva grows and prospers. And just imagine, remember, back in those days, we're talking about almost 20 years ago, okay? North Miami Beach was relatively small compared to what it is now. The yeshiva was relatively small compared to what it is now. And if you speak to someone, come on, they don't need such a big building, on this, they don't that, what's the big deal? But Dr. Hahn, from his perspective, because he was machshav, what community means, what North Miami Beach means, what the yeshiva means, what a place for boys to learn Torah day and night, 24/7 means. He invested, he recognized the chashivas, and he said, he had vision, he saw down the road. They tell a story about Hahn, the Gadol Hador back in Europe in the 19th century. They say when he was a young Rav, he printed his first sefer, and he was relatively unknown at that time. And someone approached him, or he approached someone rather, approached the Gvir and says, can you please dedicate or sponsor my first sefer? The Gvir said, no, it's maybe give him a couple dollars, I don't know exactly, a couple rubles, but he wasn't interested. Years later, right, when he was already a known gadol, he printed a couple of farm already, was about to print another sefer. This Gevir approached Rabbi Hahn and said, I would like to sponsor the sefer you're about to print. Rabbi Hahn says, I'm sorry. We'll find some people, there are other people around. Says, when I was young, if you appreciate Torah, you appreciate godless and a good sefer, that's when you go ahead and have the vision to invest in Torah, invest in a sefer. Now, it's no big deal. I'm a famous scholar, I'm a big person. What's the big deal? Dr. Hahn's vision, his insight, his brilliance was because he was concerned. He loved so much Torah, he loved it, he loved Yiddishkeit, he loved the community, and he wanted to ensure that the community grows, that the yeshiva grows with Shemol Zeteris. You know, Chazal say that there's for every neshama who passes away, there's 2 Yemei Hadin, or numerous Yemei Hadin. And Chazal say that Rabban teach us what does that mean, 2 Yemei Hadin. There's one when he passes away, that's the first Yom Hadin. What did he do? What did he accomplish? The second Yom Hadin is every yard site. Why? What's the purpose? He already had his Yom Hadin. He already Hashem figured out pros and cons, what he did. Schlusim and Chalgos, Rahman al-San, and he already has his Yom Hadin. What's the big deal? Chazal say because every yard site, there's analysis. Hashem does another analysis. What did this neshama, what did this nifter cause, inspire, for Rahman al-San, inspire in a negative way over the last year? Who was inspired to learn Torah? Who was inspired to do mitzvahs? Who was inspired to do chesed? When that person, with his lifetime, inspired someone to do chesed, 20 years, 100 years down the road, to do a learning Torah, mitzvah, whatever it might be, that chus gets added on to that neshama's cheshbon. And that Rabosai is what Dr. Elliot planted that seed because of his investment. The seed was planted at every yard site. Right? Last Sunday, there was a Yom Hadin for him. And I can assure you, I'm not a Navi, I'm not a Kabbalist, but I can assure you that din that was analyzed, that took place last Sunday, analyzed and saw all the hours and days and tremendous Mesiras Nefesh learning that took place because of Elliot Hahn's investment years ago. And B'ez Hashem, it's pretty partial to me, and it's our bracha that these zechusim will continue to be calculated in every single yard site. There will be more zechusim added because the future also will have so many zechusim, all the Torah he's inspired, all the mitzvahs he inspired, all the Bali Shuva and SIyum he inspired, everything gets added up every year. It's a cheshbon. We are those to be beneficiaries. We thank Dr. Hahn and Tibal L'Chaim, Lillian, his Ashes Chaim, was with him every single step of the way. She's been there, supporting him in what he does, believes in it, and that we should be zocha, that we should see the periods for years to come of his endeavors and his ma'asim tovim. Bench in a couple minutes.
That's